Hello guys, it's LaserAshton1001 here, and welcome to our first episode of Extinct Universal Roblox Ride Reviews. This is the show where I basically give you my thoughts on extinct rides, tell you if they were still around, if I'd check them out or not, give them a solid score out of 10, and say the good parts about it and the bad parts about it. For episode 1, today we're going to be talking about Back to the Future the ride. So let's get into some of it. So let's just get into it if we will. Okay, so Back to the Future the ride was a miniaturized rock and roller coaster type ride attraction at Universal Studios Roblox that ran from February 2017 to January of 2022. So very recent closure. The ride would start out. So one of my favorite parts of the ride was that there was no storyline about it, and there was also not ever really long waits. The ride originally opened with a queue, but in early 2021 that queue was removed when the park updated, as well as Forbidden Journey, which their screens were also removed during that same time, so that was a major difference. Now, something very interesting is that both Back to the Future and Stu's Disco Coaster, both extinct also, both used pretty much the exact same kind of track type vehicle. Both had the same vehicle, borrowed the same vehicle. The stations were pretty similar, different theme obviously, but the way the cart would not stop at the station, and you just jump on. And the best part was you didn't have to get off the ride either. You could stay on it as many times as you want, and it was the only Back to the Future was the only ride at the park that didn't have a ride leaderboard competition, so it wasn't a popular ride in the last final days. But as mentioned earlier, the ride opened on February 12th, 2017 to much success. Originally, the ride opened with the actual ride soundtrack used in Orlando until the ride closed in the early 2000s. Now the ride would start with an illuminated tunnel. At the end of the illuminated tunnel there would be a Twin Pines Mall sign stating that it was 1 something a.m. Anyway, so yeah, there was a Twin Pines Mall sign at the end of this old illuminated tunnel at the start of the ride. After that, you would go into this highway scene where you would accelerate up to 88 miles per hour, even though the speed limit said 85 miles per hour. As after going into black, you are now racing around trying to get back to 1985, getting back to 1985, if you will. The ride experience the entire roller coaster experience was basically pitch black with popular scenes from Back to the Future on the walls. It wasn't much of anything, and it wasn't that long of a roller coaster sequence. And at the end of the roller coaster sequence, they would state that you've successfully brought Bib back to the future. And since you brought Bib back to the future, you were now able to get back off the ride and leave and just go explore other park attractions. And sometime around 2018, Back to the Future the ride received a new audio soundtrack and still became a very popular ride. The ride would always occasionally have quite long waits, especially on select peak days. However, in March 2020, Back to the Future days were coming to an end, as Fast and Furious Supercharged, now currently known as Furious Racing, opened its doors in late March 2020 at Universal Studios Roblox. This ride was definitely screamed rock and roller coaster. However, it was on a much more wider and more thrilling scale and more of a storyline than Back to the Future. Because of this, Back to the Future began having also issues. It was an outdated ride at the park, one of the oldest, and not the most recognizable. And it also couldn't even be considered a Back to the Future ride, since the only thing that made it Back to the Future was the soundtrack, a few scenes, and pretty much all that was left of that was just a high-speed roller coaster ride in the dark, which the real-life ride was not a roller coaster ride. It was a simulator, but a lot of the simulator rides with screens in real life at the park had to be turned into dark roller coaster rides at the Roblox version. Well, after nearly 5 years of the California Turnpike, or not that, but after 5 years of bringing guests Back to the Future. Back to the Future closed literally not even a month shy of its 5th anniversary on January 3rd, 2022. The devs right after this, construction walls were placed around the area, and the exit shop was also closed. Nothing really happened to the building ever since, and it was such a popular ride. But now comes my reviews and all that. Was it worth it riding? And depending on when it was always such a great ride to experience. The good about it was that the beginning really did have a Back to the Future theme, especially with the way the sound effects were, the illuminated tunnel, the scenes, and all that. The bad was definitely the roller coaster parts of it. This is because really it wasn't much of anything, and similar to Back to the Future, it was just basically that rock and roller coaster kind of copy. Back to the Future still inside still had a great ride experience. Was still like a great ride, and with mixing the good with the bad, I would have to say Back to the Future would be a solid 5 out of 10, because half of it does go for it being one of the most popular rides at the park, one of my favorites, one of my pure favorites, another one with the great scenes that were put into the ride. It's just the bad kind of the roller coaster scenes, which were most of the ride, just kind of took away the other half of it. Especially since it was only a 3-minute experience, it wasn't really worth riding. Anyway, today at the park, Fast and Furious Supercharged, now Furious Racing for the 30th time, still entertains, still gives guests that same experience that Back to the Future the ride once gave. And yeah, that's pretty much the story of Back to the Future. And I want to know what your thoughts are in the comments down below. If you guys ever went on this ride, if you guys went on the ride when it closed, if you guys remembered a lot of the footage that we've seen so far from me and a lot of the stuff, I was wondering. Another question is, did you guys go to the ride when it first opened? Or did you guys ever go to the ride right after it opened or right before it closed? I went right before it closed, but I was one of the very last people on there, just like with the Forbidden Journey, which we will talk about next time. See you later. Bye-bye.